Welcome back to Das Wagen Garage. Now, if you've watched up with me and kept up with what I've been doing, you have found out that I recently just put in the cage and painted it as well. So the interior is done. Now, the next thing for me to work on is going to be the rear suspension specifically. And today is going to be a little bit different. Today, if you are also working on the rear suspension of a Porsche 944, you actually might learn some things or might be able to take some hints and help from the work that I'm doing today. Not very common for the videos that I'll be making. Most of it's just documentaries for the work that I'm just doing. But today you actually might get some information out of this if you're doing the same thing. Now, today what I'm doing is actually removing the factory steel stamped arms, rear control arms, and replacing them with the aluminum arms from an 86 Plus model. The benefit of that is a lighter suspension, easier to work with on the components, and while I'm going to be doing that, I'm also going to replace the bushings. So if you're replacing the bushings, you could also take a look at this information, because there's some parts that will not be upgraded because they don't need to be upgraded, and all I'm going to be doing is changing the bushings. So either way, whatever you're looking for, or you're just following along or wanting to learn something new, let's get into it. Now, as I mentioned, what I am going to be doing is replacing actually replacing these steel arms with an aluminum arm. This comes out of a 85, 86 Plus, so that means from 85 to 94 last year models that they made the Porsche. So this was a turbo model arm. This is the earliest model arm, and this suspension actually is the same suspension design as the Volkswagen Beetle. So you can find the same style components in a Volkswagen Beetle. They were very similar in that aspect. Now, what I'm going to be doing today, and what's going to be worked on, is taking this whole arm out. There's a coupling on the end of this that is support for the torsion arm into the subframe for the chassis. And this coupling comes off. There's the spring plate that comes off that you see right here. There's also, with that, there's going to be an internal bar, and that bar inside actually helps resist the torsion of the suspension, because instead of doing a coilover setup, they did just a shock. And as mentioned, along with all of that, I'm going to be replacing the bushings. So that means the bushings here, this will get brand new bushings, because those brand new bushings will not fit those. New bushings off of the spring plate. I've got new spring plate. The spring plate is going to be different, so that's another factor you have to keep in mind. If you are replacing these with the aluminum arms, you have to get new spring plates. They're a different design. I found that out myself. You have to replace with a new design. And then just replacing the bushings. So that's going to be the coupling. There's outer bushings on the spring plate. Then there's bushings that tie in for the subframe, the chassis, and the bushings, as I mentioned here. So we're going to get into that. Now, the first thing we're going to work on taking off, is going to be this external coupling for this. That way we can actually loosen the spring plate, and it will help us maneuvering and getting the entire arm out in general. Might as well just try to get it all out in one piece if we can. So this coupling here, there's 4 bolts. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So and these bolts look like they're brand new. Now, I don't know, and certainly it's going to be a lot harder to find if these bolts need to be replaced. A lot of the bolts, when in terms of Volkswagen, Porsche, Audi, the typical German conversation is that if it is a stretch bolt, torque to yield bolt, they have to be replaced, especially suspension bolts, the control arm bolts especially. Now we're essentially going to fight and wiggle this thing off. There we go. Now, if you're like me, fortunately, these are rubber. They're like 40-year-old. This car is from 1984, and this car has 40-year-old bushings. So they are going to be a pain in the butt to take off, as in you're actually probably going to need some heat. So we got that off. Now the next thing that we'll need to get off is going to be this arm. Ideally, I would like to be able to take this off and this off together, but that may not be feasible, but I'm about to see here in a second. The best thing to do about taking these off is going to be removing the bolts here. There's a large bolt head that's here, but all you're going to do is remove this nut. You actually might be able to have to hold this on with vice grips or pliers, unless if you actually have the nut that fits that head. Otherwise, what you're going to be working on is taking off these 3 bolts to remove this, because you're not actually going to be able to easily remove this still being stuck inside the shaft while trying to remove this. It's just a pain. So let's do that. Move a little more freely than I thought. And this one is a special bolt. You can see just how different it really looks when you pull it out. The thread, the collar is not directly centered. This is just a bolt that Porsche made for this so that they can align it with the slotted hole behind it. So this is a little bit different. This is really just kind of to align the slot into the hole. That's all. Now what I'm going to do is go ahead and take this collared bolt off right here. And this is going to be for the control arm itself. And then loosening this should be able to remove the control arm. You're going to have to finagle it. And these are some beefy bolts. So if you want to replace these bolts, which I would recommend, these are M12 by 1.5. And these are 90 millimeters long, or 90 millimeters long. So you should be able, and 30 millimeters of threaded length. And that's your dimensions. Now with that removed, I should be able to just, slot that out. That's removed. Now, with that being removed, now the fun part is actually going to be getting the bushing out at the end. Now that I've had to take off the control arm itself, I've now been able to get this free, and I've actually been sitting this on old calipers. Won't be reusing these calipers. But all you need to do is pry this off. And what you notice, what comes on the out of it is a internal torsion bar. Now this, as I mentioned before, is this internal torsion bar helps with eliminating the torsion of the rear subframe, which is why it was called the rear torsion bar. Now, to give a brief background on that, it is very simple. It is just simple engineering, and I can draw it up on the board if you like, but that board is occupied. But so the idea behind it was simply to limit the torsion in the rear suspension. So instead of doing a coilover and damper setup, they decided to do a torsion bar, like almost like a leaf spring without the coils. So that's preventing the torsion that they have simplest terms, this was where the rear suspension was. They had a mounting point that mounted up here, and inside was that torsion bar. And with that, they had the damper itself that was mounted right there. So that allowed them to limit the amount of components that they used and keep it simple enough that they can make it interchangeable. Now, I did mention that this suspension is also used in the first generation Beetles. So they use the same suspension setup. Now, because of that, the way that they had set up their suspension versus how I'm going to set up the suspension, I actually need to cut this arm off. This is that arm that was tied to the chassis that also assisted with this torsion bar, limiting that torsion I mentioned. It kind of counteracted. Now this is the correct orientation to where it would sit, but in general, what it was doing was when the body rotated, put this inside, when the body rotated like this, it had this moment arm to limit that. So it prevented it from really stressing out the damper that was connected to the control arm. Really simple, idealistic stuff. Just the matter of it is now it's not going to be as useful for race car design. Now, what I will be doing, like I said, is I will have to actually cut this arm off. And that means from around here as best as I can. And this plate's really beefy. It's going to take me a moment. But those are parts that I won't be needing anymore. That way I can go to a coilover setup. And so if you're watching this video and you're just trying to figure that part out, whether you want to do that and how to do that, this is what you would do. So that's the recommendation. And because the aluminum arms are simplistically bolted onto the coilover itself, would be bolted onto the arm, it's not, the coilover itself is not going to be sitting in a cup like the steel plate arms are. That's your very common design you would see in most modern cars, especially most Volkswagen cars, where the coilover will still sit in a little cup almost. It'll be bolted through, but it'll sit in a cup. Now, that's the benefit of this, is going a little bit lighter and taking off some of that torsion so that we can actually have a useful suspension. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut that up, clean this up, and then getting into actually taking off these bushings. Now the bushings are old. The best thing you're going to need is to get some heat, but we'll get into that. Now I have actually done the work. I have actually, if you can see it from here, I have actually cut this portion off for where the torsion arm of the torsion bar was. And as I mentioned, there wasn't going to be a benefit to it. It was going to be part of it in the way and over torsion because the way that the suspension originally was set up. We will not be using that. I will not be using that. So as you can cut as close as you can to these flanges for where you're going to be screwing into the bolts for the coupling for the subframe. That you want to get as close as you can. You don't have to be perfect, but as close as you can. And you can do whatever you want with this. Once you have done cutting those things, you can paint these things. You can clean this up as clean as you want to get it. You can paint it over. That's entirely up to you. I leave that up to you. Our most important part with this is making sure that the surfaces in between where the plates for the bushings, for the control arms, are going to be. And make sure that these surfaces are clean from top and bottom. This is spot of drying it off. That's what you're really focused on. Internally, there's going to be a little bit of grease. It's up to you if you want to clean that out. I would, out of simplicity's sake, it's not going to be that big of a deal. Now, that is for the arm, because the next step is all the bushings. So this is the coupling that ties into the subframe itself, these bushings. Now, I'm going to make this inherently clear. I am not going to show you how to remove the bushings. You can figure that out yourself, and that sounds kind of mean, but you might have a way versus every other guy. You already might have taken them off. I'm not going to show you how to do this. I've got to take all of them out myself anyways. Once I get done with that, have these cleaned up, we'll come back and I will have mine installed. If you need a way to how to take the bushings out, I will leave a link in the bio. If you want to have a link to how to install bushings like these, I will put a link in the bio. That is not going to be the importance of today's video. You do not need to see that. So I will let you do that freehand. I picked up some Powerflex bushings, and I'll show you guys that later. But I picked up Powerflex bushings. You guys can come up with whatever bushing manufacturer you want. I chose Powerflex. It's the best option that they had, especially for the S2 models. With that said, you can pause the video right here, and you can do all that work and come back to this spot. I will do my best to make sure that there's an indent on the video so you can come back to this right spot. I've never done that before, but I'll figure that out. So we'll come back and we'll have all the pieces together. When we come back, we're putting the suspension back in. I'll use the old dampers just in case, just temporary, because I do not have new coils, but just the original dampers in place, and we'll get back to putting the suspension back. So I'll see you guys later. Pause the video, do your work, come back. At this point now, you should actually have all your bushings back on the surfaces. Your chassis to rear subframe, the torsion spring plate, and then if you're using, like I said, the new aluminum arms like me, your new bushings. Now, the whole process about putting this back together is the reverse of how you've actually taken it apart. The one thing that is to note, and should be pretty simple from how you recognize when you took it apart, is spring plates will go on the inside of this. The reason being for that is there's an octagonal, well, there's a odd-shaped head bolt. It's an offset bolt, and that's supposed to be on this side, and it sits in a slot for it to hold in, and I'm just using words at this point, but that odd-shaped bolt only goes on the one side. That way that it can stay flush with the opposing side. So this arm is supposed to go, so the spring plate surfaces will actually go on this side, just to note. So let's get started. Now what I'm going to actually start with is actually putting on the spring plate with the arm that connects to the chassis itself. The control arm is actually going to be a secondary task to this. So one of the few things that you'll have to note with regards to putting this back together is out of the 4 bolts that connect through here, one of them is longer. And the reason for that is because if you have the 84 or 85 down, means anything prior to 85, you will likely have the older arms. And I believe, if I'm correct, that you'll have the older arms that actually has this spacer. And I might be wrong. All of the models might have the spacer, but from the digging that I had done, these are the models that do come and have this spacer. So you'll have a note of that when you put this together. And that's going to be the only one that has a longer bolt. The rest of them are going to be the same length bolt. So you can see it here. They're only slightly different. In addition, if you're like me and will replace these bolts with longer bolts, or replace these with brand new bolts, I love to do that religiously when going through McMaster-Carr. However, what I've noticed is that these are not higher of a tension or loading, so these do not see a lot of stress. So I did not replace these. The other bolts usually are going to be recommended to replace, the ones that go from the control arm that goes straight through and connect for the chassis. Those you would replace. The bolts that you would go through at the end of the control arm that connect to this subframe, those you would also replace. So there's a few that I've replaced with brand new McMaster-Carr bolts. But for now, those are the few things that you'll have to note with regards to putting this back together. So this is real simple. You can put this in any form of fashion. Just kind of have to press that in. Then the harder part is going to be making sure that this guides on. And you can probably do this in another number of different ways as well. You can probably put this on first and then put the bolts through. So I'm going to do that. I actually lied. I wasn't going to show you the other one. I actually ran into an issue, and now I'm going to show you how to put this together. It's real simple. The first thing you want to make sure of is that the rod end, well, I'll call it the rod end, actually goes through the collar. So you actually want it in like this. So let me give me a second. Let me press this in the best that I can. Sure, I have a little length to pull it together. Not yet. So one of the simple things to do is a usual method for when you torque down the surface together, no matter what that flat surface to flat surface is. Simplest is to, even like your wheels, cross torque over a bolt pattern. And that's actually what I've had to do here, is just try to press these on with a bolt pattern. So give me a second. This one is a lot better than the last, but method is the same. Actually might have, I have enough. Oh, yeah, should have enough. I just need to orientate it just correctly. So that gets threaded in. Make sure I have my aluminum spacer. That to slide a hole. Get a slight thread on that. Same thing. Make sure that there are threads that are grabbing. Then what you're actually going to do, should pull this back. Then what you're actually going to do is, the first thing, you want to thread in the longest bolt that has more threads. There's not enough for any of the other three to grab. This one has most of the threads, or should have most of the threads threaded in. And then, like you would for your own wheels, beware that spacer will still rotate, but you want it vertical, or at least parallel as best you can with the inside surface of the arm here. There you have it. I have finally assembled the rear suspension. It is all together in all of its glory. We have the original arms that connect from the coupling of the torsion bar itself to the chassis, the new spring plates, the new control arms, all with new hardware, new bushings, all of it installed, finally. And yes, you guys didn't see me installing the control arms and putting the whole thing together for a reason. But anyways, this is all together, and the only thing left to do is really to lift this up in the car. The differences now are that instead of the original arms having a torsion plate that connected to the chassis, that has been removed. The bushings are a lot stronger. They're not a rubber material. The control arms are lighter. The hardware has been upgraded as well. Instead of being a grade 8 or grade 5 equivalent, they have been upgraded to a SAE grade 8 equivalent as ISO grade 10.9. So this is a lot stiffer and should hold up a lot better. And the addition going to be is moving forward, since there's no internal torsion bar, there's no torsion plate to the chassis of the car, it's all going to be reliant upon the rotational motion of the suspension, making it independent with the coilovers that are going to be installed. So that will come at a later time, and this is all very good. So I'm going to have a friend over. We're going to have put this in the car and then call it a day, see how it looks. Finally get to put the wheels back on the car and drop this car to the ground. All right, like I said, I've got my friend out here helping me. This is Ben, my friend Benji from Poland.
Dzień dobry, jak się masz?
Whatever he just said.
Yeah.
But we're going to put the suspension on and get it back on the ground. All right, we've got the suspension in, thankfully, and it is there. There it is, all in place, all together. Thank you, Ben. Again, this is my friend Benji. He does his own channel of stuff on TikTok, right?
Yeah,
so you do some
live
stuff.
stream on TikTok,
So.
_Beto. Check me out Mondays through Fridays sometimes, whenever.
So, but I thank you for helping me out
Absolutely.
with this. So. Now that we have actually put in the suspension, assembled it, it's up in place, it is done. The rear suspension is done. What I have next to do later down the road or some point is the front suspension. That will just be changing the bushings. I've got the new hub assemblies. Those hub assemblies don't attach to the existing or this OEM shock, so I need to change those out. So there's a few other things to do for suspension alone. But we are done with the rear. That's the good thing. I have a few things to assemble for the rear before I can just drop it on the ground. I only have one shock for one side, which might be fine for literally just putting it back on a trailer and moving around. Which, speaking of that, I am going to be, after this video, I might be quiet for a little bit, but I'm not actually going to be quiet. I'm moving some things around, getting reorganized, and the car will still be worked on. Videos will be different, location will be different, but it would only be temporary for some time. So the car is still going to be worked on. I'm going to have plenty more content. The rear suspension is in. I'm probably thinking maybe work on the front suspension next. That means changing the bushings, changing the hardware, changing the uprights, changing the shocks, doing the whole front now. So that I pretty much have done the interior. I have the front to do. That means even the engine bay. That could also mean the subframe I work on. But I'll get to that sometime later. For now, thank you for following along and watching this. And if you did catch up and get some good information out of this, you're welcome. I'm not the greatest. I will not be the greatest of giving like a detailed documentary video, but it was my attempt to of how to assemble the rear suspension with new components, new hardware. So thank you so much for sticking around and watching, and stay tuned for the next video on Das Wagen Garage. See you guys next time.